Welcome to the Career Refresh Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Griffin. I'm a former media and marketing executive turned career strategist and executive coach. I spent my career working my way up and through the ranks of global organizations and startups, and today I show others how to do the same. Join me each week as we discuss the strategies and actionable steps to leverage your strengths, increase your confidence, and develop your career well-being. Ready? Let's do it. Hey friends, this is the Career Refresh, and I am your host, Jill Griffin. Today, I want to welcome you to an interview that I have done with my friend, Dr. Sarah Nicholls. I met Dr. Sarah in Ireland a couple of months ago, and we were there on a trip with a few other women, and it was just a blast. And I got to spend a lot of really quality time with her over the course of a week. And we aligned on so many things. And while she is a doctor in medicine, there are so many similarities between the corporate space and also the hospital space. At the end of the day, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, a hospital is still an organization or a company, right? They still have similar challenges that we have in corporate. So one of the things that we talk about, which is so important, is how to take care of yourself and the non-negotiables, which if you've been listening for a while, you know that I am really big on your career strategy, which the foundation of which is getting clear on your non-negotiables. She also talks about the impact of perfectionism and people pleasing, and also the impact of what happens when you can be vulnerable with your peers and colleagues, and in her case, fellow doctors and medical professionals in the workplace. Dr. Sarah is an emergency medicine doctor, an online educator, and a YouTuber. And she believes that our careers are what we do, not who we are. She helps perfectionists, people pleasers, procrastinators overcome self-doubt and design a life that they love. Her big goal in life is to help healthcare workers avoid burnout so that they can enjoy the life that they deserve while also giving their best to patients. And what I love so much about our conversations, both in Ireland and also today, is the similarities between if we are not taking care of ourselves, we cannot show up for our families, for our work. Really, really important to figure out how to manage your mind, how to deal with stress, how to manage burnout. Because if you're not managing those things, you're going to fall into the perfectionism, the people pleasing, the procrastination. It's all just sort of numbing yourself out or finding ways to avoid what it is that you really need to deal with. So dig in, give it a listen. As always, you can email me at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. We will answer any questions. We can also bring Dr. Sarah back if you have any questions and you want to get the medical, point of view on building a successful career while maintaining both your mental and your physical health. All right, friends, I appreciate all of you so much for continuing to listen. If you like this episode, I ask you to share it. And if you love this episode, I ask you to rate and review. It does help get the word out. It does help the algorithm. And I want to get this work out to people so that they can also refresh their minds and succeed in their careers. Give a listen. Have a great week. And as always, here's to possibility. Hey, Sarah, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Jill, it's such an honor. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this.
So let's get right into it. I always love to ask, take us back. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up. And then I also want to hear, what did you think you wanted to be when you got older?
Oh, okay. So you may be able to tell from my accent. I am based in the UK. I live in England. I was brought up in Essex, which is near London. And when I was growing up, there were three things I wanted to be. One was an author. I love writing. I love thinking creatively. One was an actress. Don't know where that came from. I cannot act to save my life. And the third was a doctor. And the reason I wanted to be a doctor is just because I love people. I absolutely love people is my passion. I just love understanding people, getting to know people. I love caring for people, and really enjoyed science at school. And I was a kid that I was such a little nerd. When I was out on my bike playing with the local neighborhood kids, I used to take with me a little, you call them band-aids, we call them plasters. I used to take those with me. I used to take a little like emergency kit with me in case anyone fell over and grazed their knee. I was that kid.
Oh my God, I love that. That's so sweet.
Yep. And so fast forward many, many years, I am actually a doctor. So I made it. I did what I said I was going to do. And I took a bit of an unconventional route into medicine. I did a different degree before I did med school, which is similar to the route that you guys take in the US, but it's a bit unconventional here in the UK.
Okay.
And I'm also a YouTuber, so I guess I get to do a little bit of the actress, author lifestyle, putting out some content,
Right. It gets to come out in
creatively. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And more recently, I've started doing online education and coaching. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I love it. So we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper into some of those, especially understanding what you're doing today, because I know that it's your passion to help other doctors and medical professionals in some of the real things that go on. I mean, we've just come out of a global pandemic, and the impact on healthcare workers has been enormous. So let's get into it. Like, how have you personally managed that pressure of what was going on then and then now?
Ooh, that is a juicy question. Yeah, I mean, I worked all through the pandemic, as most healthcare professionals did. I work in emergency medicine, and it was hard. It was hard, and actually, we're still seeing the ramifications of it now. There is a huge amount of burnout amongst physicians. There was a recent poll done, but I think it was through Medscape, and they found that approximately 60% of emergency physicians are suffering with burnout symptoms.
Wow.
It's huge. It's a really big problem. So personally, how I managed was I actually, similar to most people, I caught COVID during the pandemic, and I ended up having long COVID for 5 months. So I went from working full time, this busy, fast paced environment. I felt like this duty to give my all to work and like really hunker down, do something good for my country, do something good for the patients, working as hard as I possibly could. Caught COVID and was unwell for 5 months. And the only way that I could get through that period of time was to reduce my working hours. I found I was only able to work one shift at a time. I could do one shift and then I had to have a day off to recover. So I had to do this strange working pattern where I was basically doing like one on, one off. And it took me 5 months to get back to full strength. And that was something that made me really reassess my priorities in life, made me really think about, how I'm looking after myself, think about how tired work was making me, think about the burden and the responsibility of my job. And also it allowed me to empathize with my patients more, because when I have patients that come in talking about their chronic illness, their fatigue, other medical ailments that they've been suffering with, it's allowed me to really, on a very small scale, understand the burden of being unwell and feeling not right in your body every single day.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Because let me take a step back. What I can imagine for many of our listeners, that they are also, they may not be all medical professionals, but they are working in the workplace and are working with colleagues who may have either long COVID or just any other sort of sickness, and just the idea of working with someone and having compassion for someone. But there's still an expectation we have to get the job done. So how did you work through that when you're having that pressure and hearing, you're almost like, there's an expression going around right now, a pain sponge, right? Like you're almost taking in everyone's stuff, but you need to also be able to show up and get your job done. So how did you manage that with yourself?
Yeah, that's such a good question to ask, and for the listeners and viewers to think about, because I did have this pressure on myself. When I turn up to work, I feel, and rightly so, I feel like I have to give my all to my job. When I turn up to work, I'm not there as a person who's feeling poorly. I'm there to take care of people. When they come into the emergency department, people come in, they're having the worst day of their life most of the time. No one plans to come to the emergency department. It's always a bad day if you end up there. And so I had to come up with a way of being able to show up as my best self, even when I wasn't feeling 100%. And there was a couple of things that I did. So the first was to really, really take good care of myself. And, this people are going to like roll their eyes when they hear this, but it sounds so simple, but it's not always easy. Sleep, nutrition, and exercise are the big three. The bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, really making sure we're safe, we're well. I found I was having to get about 10 to 12 hours of sleep a night, sometimes with naps on top of that.
Yeah.
So I just had to really focus on that. Nutrition, making sure I was eating like 7+ portions of fruit and veg a day, getting loads of protein, getting my healthy fats in, really making sure that I was like avoiding sugar, too much caffeine, alcohol, those kinds of things, and just really eating a clean diet. And exercise. Now, I'm a big exerciser. I love to run, love to lift weights, love to keep myself healthy and fit. This was a hard one for me because I couldn't do that so much when I had long COVID. I was finding I was going out for a walk and that was like exhausting to me. I had to come back and sleep.
Yeah.
So honing in on those three things, and then realizing, the things I couldn't do. And this is something I want to talk about, which is perfectionism. So honing in on the things that I couldn't do and just allowing them to fall away, because especially as medics, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will have this mindset as well. People in the corporate world, climbing the career ladder, we want to get everything right. We want to be everything to everybody. We can't admit to any weakness, any failures. We still feel like we have to say yes to everything. Now, I just had to allow myself to say no to loads of things. I had to say, no to the Zoom calls that were going on or any of my other responsibilities. My life for that 5 months was work and recovery. The other thing that helped me at work, and again, this is coming back to this perfectionism piece, is allowing myself to show that weakness to my colleagues. So I said at the start of my shifts, if I was working with people I hadn't worked with for a while, in the emergency department, everyone's working different shifts. Each time you go into work, you're with a different team. Everyone in the team is completely different. It's just how it is. It's 200 and something people work in my department, never working with the same people. So I would say, look, guys, just at the start of the shift, introduce myself, if there's anyone new there. Just want to make it really clear. I'm a bit fuzzy-headed, suffering with long COVID. If there's anything that, I'm being a bit slow on, or you think I'm missing, please feel free to highlight that to me. Let's work together on this. So I want to make sure that we're keeping the patients safe and that we're doing the best thing for everyone. Just opening those lines of communication that like, look, I'm not perfect and I'm having a tough day.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that you said that. And I want to touch on two things, because what I always talk about in a career strategy is, one, you have to nail your non-negotiables first. And that is food, nutrition, exercise. What are your personal and family commitments that are a top priority for you? What is your social life looking like? What are the things that you want? And then you anchor those first, and then you find ways to negotiate that within the job, either that you're going for, or maybe the job that you have. But the non-negotiables have to happen first. So I love that, hearing from a doctor, so everyone listening and watching, the doctor said, we have to nail the non-negotiables first. And everyone's going to have a different non-negotiable. So that's the clear part. And then when we take it into the idea of, vulnerability and loving Brene Brown and her Dare to be Brave, and understanding that there's so much strength in vulnerability. I would say the difference is, in your world as medical professionals, they're going to understand that, and they're going to understand the impact of that, potentially have empathy or compassion for that. Whereas in the corporate world, Not so much. However, if you have those situations in yourself, whether it was just an illness, long COVID, you strained your back over the weekend, you're feeling run down, you've come off a series of like late nights because you have a client deliverable. These are the times that, again, I can't tell you specifically what to do because I'm not in your environment, I'm not in your brain, and I'm not, I don't know your total surroundings, but this could be an opportunity to share with a colleague, perhaps share with your boss if you feel like your boss is an ally. And then, of course, there's always the opportunity to talk to HR. What I am seeing is in some of the HR membership groups that I'm in, I don't have a background in HR, but I know that the people I serve are dealing with HR regularly. And within human resources, really making sure what I'm seeing from them more is understanding the impact of not only burnout and stress, but as what we've identified in the US most recently by our Surgeon General is the enormous loneliness epidemic, and how they're saying that loneliness is like equivalent to, being a pack-a-day smoker, or there's some stat like that. That's like, whoa, that's the impact on your health. So again, it's not exactly apples to apples comparison, but it's still on you to figure out how you want to share with those around you, where you're able to show up and where you need to say, you know what, I got to stop for the day and I will get this done, but it's going to have to be tomorrow. I know it's hard, but if you don't do that, no one else is going to do it for you.
Absolutely. That is very, very true. And I always say that, part of self-care is having self-responsibility. It's actually recognizing the things that we need to prioritize to be able to take the best possible care of ourselves. And no one can do that for us.
Right.
And coming back to this corporate piece, and what you were saying about HR, hopefully with everything that's happened with COVID and lots of people becoming unwell, hopefully there is more of a shift towards corporations, HR, recognizing that we are human. Let's put the human back in human resources, and remembering that, if we look after our employees and we look after the workforce, that we can deliver much better.
Yes. Yeah. And at least from the corporation standpoint, what we forget is HR are employees too, and they need to be funded. So while everyone is clamoring to get staff for their own department, right? We're saying the great resignation or the great reassessment is over, but there is still, at least in the US, incredibly low unemployment rates, and our wages are still very high. So there's a lot of open positions out there getting filled, and the drain, if you're already burnt out, the drain on your team and your own staff is going to be harder. But if HR isn't funded to be able to service the size of the department or the community in which they serve, then there's no purpose in that, right? So making sure as a leader that you also understand and can also help advocate that HR is going to need a budget for training. They're going to need to train the people that are working in HR to understand how to handle disability, invisible disability, which is what, of course, long COVID would fall under, and understanding those things. If they don't have budgets to get trained or to support the programs within the office, then there's nothing that they can do. So the next time you're clamoring and fighting for budget, understand that the budget needs to be stretched across multiple departments in order to have a productive and profitable company. So if we go into a little bit more about your personal journey, I would love to know what was one thing that you thought that you would like more than you do. So like, I'm doing this, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I didn't know this about myself. I actually love this aspect of my job.
So something I enjoy more than I expected to.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So there's loads I love more than about my job than I expected to. When you graduate from medical school in the UK, you have these 2 years called your foundation years, and you do 6 jobs in that time. You don't really get an awful lot of choice about those jobs. And you don't really get a lot of choice about where you do them. So I did the 6 rotations, and I did some jobs in those rotations that were things that I wasn't really that interested in, and I knew that my future career wouldn't take me to that path. And so I decided to just really throw myself into those jobs, the ones that I wasn't all that bothered about, just because I knew that, this is a really privileged position to be in, and I'm never going to get to do these things again. So one of those jobs was neurosurgery. I
Oh God.
I never had an interest in neurosurgery before doing that job. But I was like, hey, this is so cool. What a privilege to be here. What a privilege to get to actually help and assist in like draining subdural hematomas and, assisting in emergency surgeries overnight and things like that. Incredible privilege. And I've realized about myself that I love fine motor skills, love doing things that are really detail orientated, that take a long time, really enjoy that kind of thing. The other thing that I really enjoy that I wasn't expecting to enjoy so much was emergency medicine. I never thought I was going to go into emergency medicine. Being a people person and being someone that loves to build connections with people, I thought I was going to go into family practice, GP, we call it over here, general practice.
Yeah.
I thought that I would want to, get to know my patients over a long periods of time, get to know their families, understand their relationships and their work struggles, and that kind of old school style family practice. But on my 6 rotations that I did, one of them was emergency medicine, and I fell in love with it. Amazing. I loved the fact that you're using your critical thinking skills. You're really doing what you're taught about in medical school, doing that diagnosis, problem solving. You're dealing with fast-paced environment, amazing team. It's so high pressure, high energy. I work in a large major trauma center. It's apparently the busiest trauma center in all of Europe. And the team is so phenomenal because we're so highly trained. We know we can all rely on each other. And I thought I would want a slower paced lifestyle, but it turns out I love this kind of adrenaline.
I love it.
High paced.
So for anyone listening and watching, Sarah and I met a couple of months ago. We were both on a trip to Ireland. And the first night that we had dinner, she talked to me about avocado hand. And I was like, wait, what? What happened? So just to tell them quickly, this was over dinner and I learned about avocado hand.
Sorry, I need to have a bit more of a filter about what's appropriate to talk about over dinner. Yeah, and for those of you who are watching or listening that don't know what avocado hand is, it's when there's injuries that happen that we just see multiple times, and one of them is avocado hand, where you're taking the stone out of an avocado with a knife, and you slice your hand, or you're slicing an avocado in your hand and you go through the skin, slice your hand. The real thing.
Right. I was like, wait, this is actually like a high thing. And then we went off on this whole tangent about, I had lost the tip of my finger at one point in an injury. So here we are at this dinner, this like beautiful, gorgeous dinner. And Sarah and I are geeking out in the corner and being like, look at how well my hand healed. And she's like,
it has healed beautifully.
Miraculous. Anyway, we all have our war stories. Okay. So the next thing I want to ask you is the opposite of that. What was more challenging than you thought?
Mm-hmm. So I would say I struggled a lot with the burden of working so many hours in an unpredictable shift pattern. I found that so hard. I know probably a lot of your listeners are US based. In the UK, we are more protected in terms of our shift pattern than US doctors. So the maximum number of hours we can work a week is 72. In real life, sometimes it does go over that because you end up staying late after your shift. The average number of hours per week per week over a month is meant to be 48. It's meant to average out over that. Anyway, I found that really hard because the perfectionist in me wanted to still be everywhere and continue all my hobbies, continue everything that I was doing outside of work. Saying yes to everything, this default people-pleasing nature that a lot of us have, and especially in medicine, a lot of us have. And I found it really hard to, quote, balance everything. And that led to me kind of getting quite overtired, feeling overburdened, feeling overwhelmed a lot of the time, and not really knowing how to manage my time. Now, I've been qualified as a doctor now for 6 years, and I feel like I've got it down. I know how to manage those things and how to balance things now. But I found that incredibly hard at the start, and people warned me, doctors ahead of me, in terms of seniority, warned me and the rest of my peer group that it would be hard, but I just didn't realize how hard until I actually started doing it.
Yeah. And again, I think people can relate because the velocity of business is real. So if you're especially in a service-based business and you have clients, the unpredictability of the hours is real. The stress is real. Again, it's not an apples to apples comparison, because you literally are saving lives. And we would often at times when we would see things getting ratchet up in the workplace and everyone's getting stressed, we would say things like, okay, well, no small babies are going to die today if we don't get this, report done. Except in your world, we're actually dealing with human life. But it is, I know that there's not necessarily a one size fits all solution, but the more we talk about it, the reason why I talk about burnout, perfectionism, people pleasing a lot on this podcast and how it shows up in our places of work. You don't work in a corporation, but you work for a hospital, which runs as some level of a company or a corporation in some ways. And if we aren't advocating and if we aren't telling people what we need and how we need to work, we're not going to make the changes. And I think, as you and I also talked about, while COVID was horrible for so many people on so many levels, there were some positive things that came out of it. The emphasis on mental health, the emphasis on burnout, the emphasis on addiction, right? Where, people were having cocktails at 2:00 in the afternoon on a work day because it was like you could, right? So understanding that people need support. And again, as we talk about it, and if you're in the US, a lot of us have employee resource groups. So being able to talk to employee resource groups and making sure that your groups are helping your peers, because your leaders may not know, your executive staff may not actually know, but you as a peer may know what's going on. Really, really important.
So is that somewhere that people can kind of go confidentially and discuss what's going on?
No, that would be an HR conversation, which again, I have an episode I'll drop in so that people can know about, how to understand when to go to HR and when not. That's a private and personal decision, because HR's function is to represent the company, not necessarily the employee. So you have to watch if that makes sense for you. What an employee resource group is kind of exactly to do that, where they're a functioning body that supports, LGBTQ plus, Black individuals, persons of color, BIPOC, working moms, disability groups, where it's a group of employees that have gotten together to advocate for their own needs within the organization, depending on what is the commonality that brings them together.
I see.
So ERGs are a way in which employees have had more of a voice in the structure, but I would pretty much guarantee if you're under 100 people, your company probably doesn't support ERGs. Again, that's an assumption. It's usually the larger companies that have the budgets, because you might bring in a speaker, you might bring in training, especially around disability, bringing in accessibility training for everyone to understand. Like, that's going to cost money to bring those pieces in, and it helps the employees get trained and also advocate.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Much needed.
Much needed. Okay, so I always talk about strengths too. And in this process, what are some of the unexpected strengths that you uncovered about yourself?
Unexpected strengths. I think I knew I was an empathetic person. I've always been someone who can connect with people quite well, especially on a deep level. But I think that this whole experience of becoming a doctor and having meaningful conversations and connections with human beings has unveiled to me a new level of empathy that I didn't know was possible. And as we spoke about at the beginning of this conversation, my experience with long COVID has really helped me to understand more about what people go through on a very, I've only experienced a very small scale version of what chronic illness can look like, but yeah, I think that it taught me a lot about empathy and connection with
and I love
people.
that you said empathy over compassion, because compassion is what I think a lot of people would think a medical professional might have. And it doesn't mean that you don't have compassion, but compassion is more, feeling for the person, whereas empathy is action. It's the feeling and the action. Okay, so I'm seeing what this person is going through. What am I empowered to do about it? Or what do I choose to do about it? So I love that you said empathy, because that's what we want from our medical professionals. It's awesome. So a couple more questions. I love to also dig into mindset, because people, I think it's really helpful when people understand that there's lots of different ways to shape your career. And I know you're doing some additional exciting things, which we're going to dig in on. But right now, how do you keep your career fresh? How do you stay? I mean, I know working in emergency medicine, which of course we would call the emergency room, ER in the US, is definitely keeping things on point. But how do you keep fresh? How do you keep excited about your actual practice?
So after my experience with long COVID, that really put things into perspective for me. And I decided from then that I would become a long-term locum doctor. I know you guys have them over in the States. Do you call them locums?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay. So locum work is where it's a bit like you choose to work when you want to work. So you pick up shifts as and when they are available. So you're not on a formal training program, you're not on a formal rota on a shift pattern, but you're picking up shifts as and when they're available.
We definitely have that. I don't know in this moment what that's called.
Okay. So it's a bit of an unconventional route, but I like to do things the unconventional way, and it works for me. And I've found that, I've had to kind of overcome a few mental blocks to get to allow myself the permission to live that lifestyle, because there's a whole thing in my head and in medicine of like, oh, you're not doing things the conventional way. You're not going up the usual traditional career ladder. Mm-hmm. But I have really dug deep and thought very long and hard about my own values. And I've really spent the last few years getting to know myself deeply and understanding what I want from life. And, I deeply care about medicine, and I love emergency medicine, and I want to be able to do it in a way that is me not being burnt out, not being tired all the time, and enjoying it when I'm there, giving my best to my patients and the staff around me. So I pick up shifts that suit my schedule, and that is how I have crafted my career to work for me and to keep things fresh and to stay in love with the profession.
It's amazing. Amazing. And that's where, for anybody of my longtime listeners, they know that I talk again about career strategy, which is, as we said before, the non-negotiables, followed by getting super clear on your strengths, knowing your skills, because just because you can do it doesn't mean you should, right? There's lots of things I can do. I'd rather stick a needle in my eye than do them, right? And then also understanding your values, right? Mm-hmm. Your values and which values need to be reciprocated. Not all my values need to be reciprocated, but if they're not, I'm going to be in a conflict with the people I work with, or my leadership, or, however the company is structured. I need to know which values need to be reciprocated and not. And all of that, along with our, thoughts and feelings, is what really shapes our career strategy. So I love that, again, the doctor said, as you were building what works for you, you are really aligning to what my personal philosophy is too. And what I wish I knew right out of university. I wish I knew right away that we can't pick everything. Again, if you're working in corporate or you're working for a company, we are workers and there are things that we need to do as part of the job. But that's when you use mindset and time management. Like if I have to do a rolling forecast at 4 p.m., which would not be my favorite thing to do in a pivot table, I can do it. But I'm also going to learn over time that that's something that's better for my brain to do first thing in the morning when I'm fresh versus when I'm tired and potentially, using an incorrect formula, right? So it's how do you work within what's given? And then as you get more and more experience, continuing to find the opportunities that really suit your needs and how you want to work. I love that. All right. So tell people what you're doing today. Because I know the medical professions and the medical community can really benefit from what you're doing.
Thank you. So I'm using my YouTube platform to reach more medical professionals, and I have created an online course and a coaching program. So just a little backtrack on that. Essentially, I created my YouTube channel because I mentioned at the start of this conversation that I took a bit of an unconventional route into medicine. And when I was looking into studying medicine, I was thinking to myself, like, I wish there was someone that I could look at on social media or on YouTube that would show me how to do this. And I was just like, you know what? There must be other people that think that. Why don't I be that person for others? So I created my YouTube channel, got some medical following now. And then when I created this video that I talked about a failure that I had at med school. So I failed one of my practical exams in my medical school finals. And I made a video about it, which was like so taboo. There is so much stigma around any sort of failure or weakness in medicine. And I'm sure it's the same in the corporate world. You've got to show this perfectionist, everything's got to be gleaming. You've got to be shiny bright. Like everything has to be perfect. I made this video and can I swear on your podcast?
Yes, you can.
I was shit scared about posting this because I was like, what are people going to think of me? I'm going to tell them.
Am I going to lose my credibility or my clout? Yeah. Or they think I'm not a good enough doctor? Right.
Exactly that. And it's ended up being one of my most popular videos. And I've had so many people reaching out to me who've said, you've given me permission to speak up about something I failed, or, I had to resit a year of medical school when I've never spoken to my family about it. Or, I've had so many people reaching out when I've allowed people, but I've shared my failure and it's allowed other people to speak about theirs or, embrace theirs. And so from that video, I was like, hey, there's something in this. There's a shift that needs to happen
here
in the medical culture. And so I reached out to my audience maybe a year and a half ago, and I sent them this big questionnaire, which had long form answers that the people could free type their answers in. And I just basically said to them, like, what's going on in your life right now? What are you struggling with? If there's something I can help with on my channel, what is that? I got 200 responses from people, and people were telling me their life story, all the things they're going through. And I'd spent days poring over these answers and it's all qualitative data. And I tried to quantify this data into something meaningful that I could then use to create something valuable. And the themes that I saw coming up again and again were, I'm not good enough. So confidence. I have to be perfect, perfectionism. I'm living a life that isn't my own. I'm doing medicine because my parents told me to. And I'm sure, again, a lot of your listeners can relate to that. I'm doing something that other people have expected me to do. And I don't really know what to do with my life. And so I spent the following year creating a resource for people to get to know themselves really well, to unlearn people pleasing, unlearn perfectionism, unlearn procrastination, and to really build their own self-confidence and decide how they want to spend their lives. Because my philosophy in life is we do only get one life, and you've got to spend it how you want to. You can't live someone else's life. And so I created this online course. It's out into the world. I've made sales. People are enjoying it. People are getting lots out of it. I've been enjoying seeing the reaction that people have had to this course. I called it Click Into Place because I wanted people to feel like things were finally clicking into place in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, it's a very convoluted answer. I'm sorry, Jill.
It's all good.
From that, people came to me and said, you know what? Do you offer coaching? Do you offer group programs? And I was like, maybe I should. Maybe I should teach some of this content one-to-one. So that's what I'm doing now. And my whole aim is to help doctors and other healthcare professionals to live a life that is free of being overtired, overburdened, and overwhelmed, and to really do the things, look after themselves fully, exquisite self-care, so that their batteries are topped up, so that not only do they feel good, but they can give their best at work. Because ultimately, the people that go into medicine are crazy about medicine. People that go into doctors love medicine before they get into medical school. And I want to help people re-find themselves and reignite that passion so that they can take the best care of their patients, because the patients deserve it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, such important work. And I know that, in our conversations, you've helped so many people already, and hopefully getting the word out here too, and letting much more people know that this is the kind of work you do. So again, I thank you for that. I'm going to put Dr. Sarah Nicholls, all of her information in the show notes. You will have her Instagram, you will have her YouTube, where you can find her, learn more about her. And, if you're a healthcare worker or a medical professional, check her out. This could be the solution to some of the things that you're experiencing around perfectionism and burnout and people pleasing and all the things that many of us struggle with. And Dr. Sarah is your woman. So thank you. I really appreciate you being here. And we will continue to be talking about this. If anyone has any questions, as always, email me at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. And if you have questions for Dr. Sarah, we can come and do a follow-up. We can do an FAQ on whatever you're asking, or maybe even have a live experience too, where Dr. Sarah can answer your questions. So thanks, everyone. And as always, here's to possibility. Hey, thanks for listening to the Career Refresh podcast. If you're enjoying this and you want more information, go to my website, jillgriffincoaching.com. There you can find information on how to work with me one-on-one, or my group programs, or even bring me into your workplace. I'll put the link to my website in the show notes. But hey, listen, before you go, do me a favor, rate and review this podcast, because it definitely helps me get the word out to people everywhere so that they can also thrive in the workplace. All right, friends, I appreciate you. I'll see you soon.